So in this video, we're going to cover making of the reinforcement bracket down here for the bottom of the shock mount. We'll also be taking out this old exhaust bracket, as well as this airbox bracket here. We'll be moving this motor mount here to this side, and then we're going to narrow these running boards down, making a cut here, pushing the running boards in, and then building a bracket to hold all that up, as well as making the secondary clutch tower for here and making a mounting plate and mounting that to the frame that's going to hold the motor. So this is where we left off. We had the shock mounted in here with the little spacer that we had made up. It goes in behind there. We had drilled it in. We had bolted that all in there. So what I did is I made up a little template out of cardboard. Once I got that figured out, I went ahead and transferred it onto a piece of steel. And then I bolted the steel on there. So the steel, the spacer, put it in there where it goes. And I tightened all this down. So on the back side on this plate, it's almost parallel from here, the measurement from here to there and there to there. And this is the piece that goes in. The only thing I had to do is a little bit of a weld in there, so I had to kind of grind that off afterwards. But you have to get this mounted in and then fit your piece in to where you're happy. And once you get that in, make sure this is kind of set at a 90-degree angle here, just so, you know, it's that little bit of extra stuff that makes your work look a lot better. And then once you get that established, go ahead and tack weld this here and tack weld that there, and then you can weld it all in. And what I did beforehand is I ground all the paint off of this bracket here, so it's ready to be welded in. Once you get this in, you want to put a tack there, and then weld this in. And then you want to put a good weld on that and a good weld on that while you still have it bolted, because if you take this off and try to weld it, you're going to warp it all and it's not going to sit right. So once that's done, we go ahead and made up another little piece, which is just here, and that's going to sit right there, and that's just going to give the whole bracket a little bit more reinforcement this way, so that as you're banging on it and beating on it, you don't end up bending this and bending the bolt. So you go ahead and weld all that up, weld that in, and that'll be it for that. So this is it, all done. Front bracket, side piece, and then reinforcement bracket. And what I'll do now is I'll pull the shock off and I'll weld the back side of that and the back side of this and the underneath of here after. But for now, I mean, it's there. It's not going to move anywhere. So that's pretty much it for that. Next thing we're going to do is concentrate on the narrowing of the running boards. And what I'm going to do is make a cut from here. You can see the line straight there. And then I'm going to bend this section in and underneath and then bolt that through. The way I get the number here is I want to keep this the same width as my outside, the outside width on my skis, which is 27.5. So if I hold myself at 27.5 on the tunnel, what I have left over is 11 inches on the other side. I have 11 inches here, so I just divide that in half, which is 5.5. So that's how far off of this I want my running board to end up. So I just take my tape measure and slide it down until I hit 5.5, wherever that intersecting point is. I'll look at the inside measurement, which is 4 3/4. So my cut is going to start from here at 4 3/4, and I mark this at 4 3/4 as well. And then I took a straight edge and I just drew that line, and then I'm just going to take a jigsaw and cut this up to this point here. So I have this cut out now. You can see that, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here because we don't need all that extra. So once we have that, we just push the running board down. This piece is going to go underneath, like so. I find the best way to do that is to take a pipe clamp, if you have one of these kicking around. Place underneath, you can stuff it through. Probably be easier if I had two hands, another set of hands. And once you're happy with that, just going to go ahead and pop a couple of pop rivets in there and hold it for now. And then we'll build the bracket that's going to support this whole running board. So I got 2 rivets in here for now. And what's going to happen is I'm going to bolt this plate on here. And actually underneath I'm going to have a steel plate that goes from here. It extends all the way here, probably angle in here, because I'm going to build a little bash guard for this chain case afterwards. So with this bracket, this piece of steel here is 4 3/4, and it's like 4 3/4 wide. And I made up this little L bracket, just a 45, and welded it. And it's 3 3/16 and 6 3/8. And what it's going to do is I'm going to weld this here right to this. So you want to make sure you're low enough to get away from those bolts. And then we're going to weld it there as well. And that'll give this whole thing the rigidity you need to be able to stand on it and ride it. The other thing I wanted to point out is this section here, how this piece wraps underneath, is actually, it goes in like right around here, and then it comes back here. So what you want to make sure is when you put this bracket on, that you at least get one bolt through this here, because that's really going to give it the strength that it needs. It's going to go there. So I'm going to go ahead and weld all this stuff up. show you what that looks like, and then that'll be it for that. We'll move on to building the clutch tower for the secondary. So there's a bracket all made up, painted. I welded in here, and I got a bolt in there. And again, this bolt here is going to carry a plate that's going to go in here after, but I'm also going to put 3 more bolts, one there, and one there. So that's it for that. So the next thing I'm going to work on is building the clutch tower. And I have some pieces here. First thing you have to do is get this. It's a live axle go-kart axle kit. You can get that on Amazon. What comes in the kit are these. That's what holds your bearings on. And then the kit also comes with the bearings you need and the bearing carriers here. Well, that's that. So on the Polaris, the brackets you have to build look like this. And those, what's going to happen is that's going to go there, and you're going to weld the live axle bearing retainer right onto that, and that's going to make up one side of your clutch tower bracket. On the Skidoo, it looks a little different because it actually has to wrap down the slanted side of the bulkhead, because the jack shaft is actually a lot more forward than the Polaris. And I'll probably show you real quick. I don't know if you can see it, but in here, the base of it wraps down and goes down around. Down the tunnel and underneath the jack shaft. You can see the jack shaft is a lot more forward on this one than it is on the Polaris. Anyway, that's that. And if you want to know the dimensions on these, the dimensions for the Polaris are right there. And then the dimensions for the Skidoo are right there. So, and then the Skidoo, the bottom plates, it's actually going to finish up like this and like that. And that's how that's going to end up being. And on the Polaris, it's just going to be one plate in the front, one plate in the back, like that. And it's going to go on the other side, just like that. And the jack shaft is actually going to go through this slot here, whereas on the Skidoo it's down the bottom, so it doesn't even interfere with the bracket. So these steel plates, they're all 1/4 inch stock. And these are 7 1/4 by 2 1/2. And this one's 7 1/4 by 5 1/2. And on the Skidoo S chassis, the back plate is 9 inches that way, 7 inches that way, and then the front plate is 9 inches that way and 5 inches that way. And again, that's all out of 1/4 inch steel. So the next step is going to be go ahead and just weld this here. I'll put a bead along here and then on the other side, and just make sure when you weld them up that they stay nice and straight. You don't want them crooked or anything like that. So we'll get that done and we'll get to the next one. So when I welded these two pieces together, I used a piece of thick aluminum. I actually clamped them like that to hold everything nice and flat, and then I put that weld in there. And then once I did that one, I actually used it for a template. I flipped it over. Now on the flat side, before I welded this, I made sure everything lined up. Make sure your bottoms are flush. Make sure your holes line up nice. And then you just clamp these two right together and then do that weld. And then after that, after everything cools off, you can go back and weld the back side of both of them. And that way they'll be exact. All right, so a couple of things. First thing is these rivets here are structural. And these ones here as well. So I don't want to cut them out of the way, but I do want the plates to lay flat on this surface here. The tunnel is actually doubled up. There's one piece here and there's one piece underneath. So everything's going to bolt through this double layer. But the structural rivets are going to remain. So I just took some paint, put some paint on there, and then I just laid the steel plates right on there where I wanted them, let them set for a while till the paint dried. And then when you pull it off, you can it marks the other side. And then you can put them right in there. And then make sure your plate's laying nice and flat on the bottom. There's no rocking or anything like that. So with that done, I'm going to the clutch tower. So I have one block clamped in between. So this piece here, I just made these notches to get by the welds over here on the inside. So the inside dimension between the clutch tower right there is 5 5/8. And what I did is I took a piece of 2x8 and I just cut it at 5 5/8, made the notches for the welds, and then I clamped it in there. And I also, after that's clamped in there, I took a square and just make sure that these leading faces are the same. And the other thing I didn't mention earlier when I welded these brackets on is, see, they have 3 holes in this side, and this side only has 2. So just make sure you line them up when you make up your plates and you lay your one plate on top of the other. So with that all done, go ahead and put this other block in there. And put my other clamp on it. Tighten it down. And that'll hold everything nice and square while you tack welding this onto the plates over here. So I'm going to take this over. Make sure I got my plates where I want them. Can't see it from there, but I just parallel the drive shaft here. And then I line this right up in there. And put that right on there. And then I measure off the tunnel. I give myself a 1/2 inch of clearance between the inside of the tunnel here. And I just make sure the back side is the same. And then once I get that where it is, where it needs to be, just double check my plates. They should actually, I don't know if you can see it from there, this little corner at the edge of the little corner at the where the little cutout is for the drive shaft should basically line right up with the edge of that. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get it close. I'm actually going to split the difference on it a little bit. And again, make sure that's parallel to your tunnel. And then you're going to go ahead and tack weld this. Throw a couple tack welds in it, and then pull the whole thing out, and then go ahead and weld everything up. There it is, all welded up. Despite my best efforts to keep everything blocked and clamped. It still did manage to shrink in a little at the top, so I'm going to have to bend it out a little bit to get it back to where it needs to be, but that's what happens. So that's going to slip right in there, like so. The secondary is going to ride right there. And what we're going to do is putting in 4 bolts. I'm going to do one here, and then 2 in the front. Be a little tricky getting them. Probably have to pull the skid frame down a little bit to get in there, but it can be done without having to remove the whole track. And I'll bolt those in. Actually, before I bolt those in, I'll get that all cleaned up, get it painted up, and then bolt it in, because that's not coming out again, and you only want to have to put it in once. So we'll do that next. All right, now we're going to work on the motor mount. And the first thing I did was I moved the motor mount on the right here from its stock location over to here, which is 3.5 inches off of that inside edge of the tunnel. And then I just came down the same amount, 2 inches, 2 inches. So that's where we'll start with that. And then what we have to do is make up our bracket, and then that bracket, and that has to attach like that. So the way I did that is I started off with this bracket here, which is 1/4 inch steel. It's 3 inches long and 1.25 inches wide. And then the hole that I drilled it is 3/8 hole, and it's 3/4 of an inch down from the top. So that goes in there. Now I'm going to put this on, that on. We're going to tighten that down. And then after we tighten that down, I went ahead and figured it out with a couple pieces of wood. Now the angle miters on these pieces are 31.5 degrees. So you can cut that right in your chop saw and use that as a gauge. And then from the bottom of the belly pan to the top of this 1 inch, it's going to be 6 inches. So what I did is I just cut a couple of blocks, 2x4 blocks at 5 inches, and then the other inch on top gives me 6 inches to the top of this bracket. So what I'm going to do is I made these up, figured out where everything was going to go, and then I duplicated it in steel, welded it all together. Now what I'm going to do is just put the assembly right on top of those blocks and let it set like that. Then I'm going to clamp this in place. Again, making sure everything's straight, parallel, looks good. I'm going to clamp that down nice and tight. I'm going to pull the whole thing off, and I'm going to take it over and just throw a weld on either side of that. All right, so I did forget to mention the lengths on these 2 pieces here. So this bottom piece here is 12.25 to the long point of a 31.5 degree miter, and then the short one is 2 5/8 to the long point of the 31.5 degree miter. And so after I got these snugged in, got those tightened down, I have my 5-inch blocks underneath on both sides, so that's all sitting on there. Now I'm going to weld in this cross piece, and the way I got the measurement for that is I just measured up by my bracket with 6 9/16. So 6 9/16 it is. And I just clamped it as far out as possible without interfering with the steering rod underneath. So you want to make sure you have full rotation of the handlebars and that this doesn't hit the bottom side of this. Now I'm going to go ahead and tack that, weld that in, and we'll put some motor mounts down here in the next step. Right, so I had these Skidoo motor mounts that I use because the one that come with the Polaris on the front side, they don't work well because they're a different setup. So this is pretty much the same thing as the mount on here. You can actually order these. You can order these on Amazon. They're pretty cheap, like 20 bucks a piece or something. But if you had a couple of Skidoo ones kicking around, that'll work just fine. So what I did is I drilled a hole in this plate here, and the way I figured the location side to side on that is I gave myself just enough room to make a little bracket, a little L bracket that's going to go in there, and I did the same thing on the other side. And then out of 1/4-inch steel, I took this and drilled this hole out first, and then I cut that slot. And the reason I cut the slot is because in order to get this whole assembly off, it has to slide forward because of this over here, the length of this bolt. So once I get that, I slide it in there, and I just cut it flush with the outside edge of this, and then the same thing on this side. And then I take another piece of 1/4-inch steel, and I'm just going to put that right on the edge. I'm going to go ahead and weld that and basically make an L bracket. And then after I make the L bracket up, I'm going to weld it to the side of this frame. And then everything will be all set from the side. That's what it's going to look like from the side. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to bring it over to the welder. I'm going to tack weld it in, and then I'm going to weld it in good. You want to be careful because there's rubber in these bushings, so you don't want to do too much welding, put too much heat to them because you'll start melting them. So when that comes out, it's going to look like that. And then it's going to go right on the edge there, and I'll weld it in here and do the same thing on the other side. So this is what the little bracket's going to look like after you weld it. I'm just going to slide it right in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and weld that on here and do the same thing on the other side. That's it for this video. The next video, we're going to put the mounting plate for the motor there. And then we're going to line that up with the secondary clutch and get that all ready to go. I ordered my clutches through a place called Peerless Gear. They're out of Indiana. And the gentleman you want to speak to is Ed Killian, and he'll set you up. The clutches that I bought were the 770 driven, and that's a 1-inch bore. And the part number is right there, PO. And the 780 driver, that's a 1-inch bore, and that's set up for 1700 RPMs for an engagement speed. And then if you get the driven through them as well, they'll make sure that they work together in tandem. And then the Polaris belt, if you're doing a Polaris, the number's right there under PO. And the Skidoo belt, the number's right there. And if you talk to Eddie, tell him I sent you, he may give you a good discount. The other thing I want to mention too is if anybody's actually building one of these, I'd be really curious to hear about that and just see what you think about the videos, and we'll go from there. But I'll probably get another video out maybe a month or two, but if you're doing this, you certainly have enough to keep you busy. So until then, enjoy the warmer weather, and we'll see you on the next one.